Hey, what's up you guys? You already know what time it is. I am back on my bed. I decided that I really like filming here, so this is probably gonna be like at least a monthly thing, probably where I film all my Letterboxd videos. Oh, if you're new, by the way, my name is Kylie. Welcome. Nice to have ya. So today, as you saw by the title, I will be talking about all of the movies that I watched in March, and it's kind of a doozy. I watched a lot of bad movies this month, to be honest, but I'm just trying to expand my palette. I'm trying to find hidden gems, so you gotta get through quite a few stinkers to do that. But we will be starting off on a very positive note because I think the very first movie that I watched this month was probably my favorite thing that I watched in the entire month, and that would be, surprisingly, Dark Shadows. So I gave this movie 4.5 stars out of 5 on Letterboxd, and I gave it a little heart. If you don't remember this movie, vampire Barnabas Collins is inadvertently freed from his tomb and emerges into the very changed world of 1972. He returns to Collinwood Manor to find that his once grand estate and family have fallen into ruin. I could not believe how much I loved that movie. A lot of it is very wacky and not very good, but I think the story itself is it's hilarious. The acting in it is so good. I think a lot of the concepts are just like, they're really far out, but they were effective to me. I thought the story was so good. I will say that the first 2 acts are definitely a lot stronger than the final act of the movie because things just really go off the rails, shall we say. But Johnny Depp's performance is amazing. I feel like the reason why this movie didn't do too well, because I think it came out in like 2012, yeah. I think the reason is because that was around the Twilight era. I think that was the year that Breaking Dawn Part 2 came out. It's like the last Twilight movie. And I just don't think that Johnny Depp was the type of vampire that people were into at the time. But the movie, like, I think it's genuinely hilarious. The comedy is really good. Like, I think it's an excellent vampire story. The movie is also set in the 70s and it's like a romance, drama, comedy. It blurs the lines between a lot of genres and I think it does so successfully. There's also a little bit of horror in there because we're dealing with like vampires and such. I think it's a phenomenal movie. I know it's definitely not going to be everyone's cup of tea, and I think it's going to lose a lot of people in the final act when things get very wild, but I absolutely love the movie. I think it's definitely my favorite thing that I watched last month. Moving on now to, oh god, a movie that I hated. It's called Lucky. So Lucky, I think that this was a Shudder original. May, a self-help author with all the answers, suddenly finds herself stalked by a masked man who mysteriously reappears every night, even when she kills him. May struggles to get help from the people around her as she fights to stay alive. Is this paranoia, or is she doomed to accept her new reality? Okay, so I gave this movie 1 star. I was not at all feeling this movie. To me, this film felt delusional. Like whoever was making it was under the impression they were doing something extremely profound, when in reality, their message was extremely muddled, and really they didn't say anything. Like, everything that seemed to be attempting to make commentary never ever took it there. Like, you would really have to dig deep, and I feel like you would have to reach. Like, you would be reaching to find something profound about this film. I am assuming they were trying to do is make commentary on the violence that women face on a day-to-day basis that like nobody talks about. But the delivery of this story, okay, first of all, there's like not really a story. There's no good plot progression. It's literally, the movie is just about this woman and this guy comes to her house every night, and that is literally like pretty much all that happens. There's no rising action, there's no resolution. It's just this woman who is surrounded by the most frustrating characters ever written, and this premise that like is so interesting and then just fell so flat. I think it's a horrible film. I don't recommend it. Up next, oh my god, a movie I liked probably even less because I only gave it a 1/2 star on Letterboxd, and that would be Fractured. So this movie was recommended by one of my favorite YouTubers, Possessed by Horror. She also goes by Sarah Hawkinson. She has another channel, but she usually makes great recommendations, and I found so many hidden gems and like so many new favorite movies from her. So she recommended this movie, and when I tell you it's one of the worst movies I've ever seen, and she stands behind it. She was like, you guys were in the comment section and like so many of you told me that you hated Fractured, but like it's a good movie, you guys. First of all, objectively, no, it's not. Objectively, it's a terrible movie. I'm not talking about entertainment value. I'm talking about the writing. It is some of the worst writing I've ever seen. I don't know how they got Lily Rabe to be in this movie, but when I tell you that you will be able to see the ending of this movie coming from 4,000 miles away, I mean that. I genuinely cannot think of another movie that was so insanely predictable. It was either when she was like reading the synopsis of the movie or like when I read it when I was doing my research on it before I watched it, I guessed the ending of the movie just by hearing or reading the synopsis. But I watched it anyways because she was like, well, there's a really good twist, and nope. Nope. But when I first made that guess, that assumption when I read the synopsis, I was like, no, there's no way. There's no way that they would use that corny ass, overused ass twist in a 2019 film. Boy, was I incorrect. I decided to watch the movie anyways because I was like, of course I'm gonna give it a chance because like she really liked the movie and I love her taste. But literally from like the first conversation in like the opening scene of the movie, I was like, oh, so I was definitely right about the ending. Because like you'll be able to tell from a lot of the dialogue that they borrowed it and are essentially copying it from an older, much more famous, much better movie. And if you've seen Fractured, I think you know which one I'm talking about if you've seen the other movie I'm referring to. And also a lot of the movie felt like it had a really weird filter over it, which I think was a stylistic choice that kind of went along with the plot, but I didn't like it. Oh, also the lead, couldn't stand him. Couldn't stand him. He wasn't like a character that was written to be likable, and it also didn't help that I don't think his acting was that great. Anyways, I just highly recommend that you do not waste your time on Fractured. I'm gonna move on now to Seven. This is a movie that took me way too long to watch because I feel like it's kind of, I guess, like a cult classic, would you say? Or is it considered a classic? Because I don't really feel like it's full out horror. It definitely feels more like a drama thriller to me. But let me know your thoughts on Seven. So I ended up only giving it a 3 stars out of 5 on Letterboxd though, just because the movie was not really for me. I did say in my review though that it's a really well-made film. Like the acting is also phenomenal. It has some really gnarly concepts. And I know that there is a really crazy twist at the end, and I did find it to be, you know, kind of crazy. Like it worked for me, but I didn't really care about it as much as I should have, as much as the movie wanted me to, because I never really felt that drawn to any of the characters in the movie. I don't feel like any of them were particularly likable. I didn't really relate to any of them. So for that reason, I felt a little bit bored by the movie because I understand its intention with being very slow and meditative. I just found it a little bit boring because I wasn't invested in the characters. I did feel hooked by the story. I was invested by the story because I was surprised by the level of gore that was in this movie with like the bodies and stuff, because it's a movie that's about this guy that he's killing people in the style of the 7 Commandments. It's pretty gnarly. Like it was definitely more gory than I expected it to be for like a Brad Pitt / Morgan Freeman movie. And I appreciated that, but the kind of slow burn element of it didn't really feel earned to me because honestly that whole premise and setup, it just felt like an episode of Bones. I think it would have benefited just from being an episode of a TV show and not like a full feature-length film. But that's just me. I know it's a very popular movie. Moving on now to The Breed. This is actually a Wes Craven production. Brothers John and Matt have inherited an island cabin from their recently deceased uncle. Along with Matt's girlfriend Nikki and other mutual friends, the siblings travel to the cabin for a relaxing weekend getaway. But not long after arriving, the group is besieged by ravenous dogs. So the premise of this movie, obviously interesting. I love a good creature feature, and I was like, whoa, the creatures just being dogs? Okay. So I also went into the movie kind of with lower expectations because I was like, well, I haven't really heard of this before, but it's a Wes Craven movie. That's kind of weird. And it basically met my expectations, but it honestly exceeded them a little bit because I thought the movie was gonna be worse. But I gave it a 2.5 out of stars. It's just like, you know, it's very mediocre. It's very middle of the road, you know, nothing special. It's not bad by any means, but it's not really a good movie. I think it's just really entertaining. But again, it's not really for me. I didn't love the characters, so I did decide to sell that movie on my Poshmark, which my Poshmark is linked down below. I am selling quite a few of my movies right now, and this is actually one of them if you want to watch it. I just recommend this movie if you're looking for something that you haven't seen before. This is kind of it's a fresher movie. It's different. Okay, moving on to a comedy that I watched this month called Identity Thief. I gave this movie 3.5 stars out of 5. It's a movie that stars Jason Bateman and Melissa McCarthy, 2 great actors. I think that for a comedy, the way that this movie kind of treads on social commentary is very interesting. It does so very lightly, and you only really pick up on it if you're looking for it, but I think it's really well done. And it's also a very genuinely sweet story, and it helps that a lot of the movie is pretty funny. Plus the performances are great. I think Melissa McCarthy, honestly, I wish that she would venture out a little bit more from comedy because I think she'd be a really good drama actress. In this movie, there's a scene that's so emotional with her and she's like crying a lot and stuff, and she really, I mean, she's a phenomenal actress. But also, of course, she's hilarious, so I'm glad we have a lot of comedies with her. Anyways, moving on. The next movie that I watched was called Slacks. When a possessed pair of jeans begins to kill the staff of a trendy clothing store, it's up to Libby, an idealistic young sales clerk, to stop its bloody rampage. So this movie is obviously really ridiculous. I gave it 2 stars on Letterboxd. It's honestly, it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be, and hence I think it earned its 2 stars. Because genuinely, it's a pretty terrible movie, but I found some parts of it to be legitimately hilarious. It's not well made. I feel like the way that it's shot is kind of disorienting because the spatial reasoning doesn't really make any sense. Like, they have a lot of one shots, like this right here, this is a one shot, like it's me, but they would shoot it against like a completely flat white background, and so there's not really any type of dimension or depth to this movie. I do think though stylistically there's a lot of color, which I like. I thought that made it look a little bit better. And the writing of it, not great. I think a lot of the dialogue is extremely stale. I don't know what it is, honestly, about Shudder movies, but so many of them just feel like they were written by a bot to me, because the language in Shudder movies just, it never feels real, if that makes sense. It never feels like a conversation that you would actually hear between 2 real people. But anyways, aside from all of that, I still think it's a pretty fun movie. The premise is just so ridiculous that it kind of works. And it feels kind of like they were making some social commentary, but it also wasn't really taken seriously enough for that to be like potent in any way. The main focus is obviously this pair of jeans that is murdering people. So I don't know, I don't really recommend the movie, but it's also not a total waste of time. Okay, up next is another Shudder movie called Stay Out of the Attic. A diverse group of ex-cons turned movers are convinced by their creepy client Vern Mueller to pull an all-nighter for a generous pay bump. As the night progresses and rooms are cleared, they slowly uncover the horrors that exist inside his old Victorian mansion, which include booby traps, human experimentation, Nazi monsters, and more. Will they survive the night? So Stay Out of the Attic received 1 star from me. I could not even finish the movie. The acting was really bad. It all kind of took place in this one location, and again, the cinematography was just, it was so bad. I keep trying to give Shudder movies like the benefit of the doubt, but just stylistically, a lot of them are just, they're not good. But anyways, it's just, this movie felt more like kind of a very cheap film student movie, and so much about it was just so technically bad that I couldn't get into it. And I guess it's not for lack of trying, but they just had some really, really strange shots in the movie that artistically I don't think the movie benefited from. It didn't contribute to the story. It's just like they were trying to make their movie more visually interesting, but it doesn't look more appealing in any type of way. Like when they first get to this house, there's this shot that's through the top windows of the door, and in theory that sounds kind of artistic and cool and like it would give the shot some depth, but in execution it just looks really weird and bad. Then there's this other scene where this guy is like trapped in a bathroom and it's just green for some reason. I have no idea why it's green in there. They don't establish what the light source is. Green also typically is to set the mood of jealousy or feeling sick, and this guy was not getting sick. He was scared. If anything, I feel like the bathroom should have been red. I'm just nitpicking at this point, but the coloring just, it made no sense and it added nothing is what I'm saying. So just not a well-made movie. For all those reasons, I really couldn't get into it. And also all the Nazi stuff was really strange. I think in concept it could have been a terrifying movie, but it just ended up being really stupid. Okay, up next, I watched so many bad movies in a row, I'm really sorry. Up next, I watched Suicide Squad and I gave it 1.5 stars. And literally all I wrote in my review was, oh my god, why did I love this movie so much when I was 16? And shout out to Emil who said, I like it despite everything. It's like watching a car crash set to some insufferable person's Spotify playlist on shuffle. That's facts, although I don't think I would call a person insufferable if they had all those songs on a playlist, because I actually think that that's kind of the only saving grace of that movie is the music. But oh my god, so this movie is bad. It's bad, but for entertainment purposes, phenomenal. It's so stupid, and my boyfriend and I, we found this drinking game to play with it. I'll put it up on the screen. Just fair warning, by the way, this game is kind of dangerous. We literally had our White Claws, like 4% alcohol or whatever, like very light, and we would just take, you know, a little drink every time that we had to. And I had to stop playing the game after like a little over an hour, I think, or maybe it was like 2/3 of the way through the movie. I was getting way too sauced. So it's a lot of fun. This game is a lot of fun because because you have to drink so often, but proceed with caution. And also please don't play the game if you're underage. This is only for my of age people. But with these rules, that is genuinely like all that this movie consists of. You spend like the first 2/3 of the movie just being introduced to characters. And then there's this huge goofy ass showdown at the end. I mean, it's phenomenal. I just think it's so hilarious that I had genuine love for this movie when I was 16 and like genuinely thought it was an amazing movie. I also dressed up as Harley Quinn that year. Didn't we all? But moving on, because we have a lot of movies to get through. Up next, I watched The Fourth Kind. I was really excited about this one because I love alien movies, and this movie also had somewhat of a found footage kind of aspect to it. I feel like most people have heard of this movie, but if you haven't, since the 1960s, a disproportionate number of population in and around Nome, Alaska have gone missing. Despite FBI investigations, the disappearances remain a mystery. Dr. Abigail Tyler, a psychologist, may be on the verge of blowing the unsolved cases wide open when, during the course of treating her patients, she finds evidence of alien abductions. So in concept, I was like, hell yeah, I'm so ready to watch this movie. But then I ended up only giving it 1 star. Ugh. Pain. I think what this movie suffers from is just, it's too much going on. A lot of the movie is spent playing these found footage videos directly next to a dramatic reenactment. So it's like you're watching 2 of the same movie just side by side. It's really weird, and I know it was meant to give the film more of a degree of realism, but it doesn't work. They also used a lot of handheld shaky cinematography, which I'm not really a fan of. The acting, I don't want to call it bad because I feel like the actors, there was some talent there, but the poor acting in the movie just felt kind of like a result of bad direction in my opinion. I couldn't really make sense of why some of the actors would act the way they would in certain situations. It made a lot of the characters really unlikable and I wasn't really rooting for anybody. So that just feels like a result of poor direction and bad writing. I don't necessarily think it was the actors. And in my review, In my review, I literally said, I don't know what's going on with this movie. Also, TBH, haven't finished it, might try to in the next days. I did finish it. I did make sure to finish it so I could talk about it. And it didn't get better, but a lot of people had said that the reason why this movie got to them was because of the ending, because the ending was so crazy. I did not feel that way. Maybe it's because the movie came out in 2009 and more shocking things have been done since then, but it just didn't really get to me. But now I'm gonna move on. Finally, we are gonna talk about a good movie, which was Nomadland. Had to give it 5 out of 5 stars and a little heart on Letterboxd. And if you're not familiar with the movie, here's the synopsis. A woman in her 60s embarks on a journey through the western United States after losing everything in the Great Recession, living as a van-dwelling modern-day nomad. And I don't know if I have much more to say right now because I feel like my review just kind of says it all. I wrote, just a really beautiful little collection of human moments, a meditative and gorgeously shot glimpse into the human experience. Here's hoping it wins Best Picture. That's really all I have to say. It was such a beautiful movie. And it was also one of those movies where they kind of got away with not really having a plot. There's no beginning, rising action, climax, resolution. It's literally just a glimpse into the human experience. And what I think is so interesting about it is really they only had 2 actors. Or no, excuse me, they only had 1. So the actress that played Fern, her name is Frances McDormand. You might recognize her from 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. She's a phenomenal actress. I believe she won Best Actress that year. That was like 2017 or something. Anyways, she's phenomenal in this. And then as you can see, everyone else in the movie is literally named after their real name. Like they were real people in this movie. So it feels a lot more like a documentary, and that's why I think they kind of get away with not really having a plot, because it just feels like a very real glimpse, like I said, into the human experience. And it's something really interesting to me in particular because my boyfriend and I really want to get a van and we want to travel like this at some point in our lives. And then if you didn't know, if you didn't watch my other video where I told you guys about this, my dad is on Letterboxd now and he wrote a review of this movie and he's just so unintentionally hilarious. My dad is one of my favorite people in this whole world, but he said, I loved this movie. I didn't think I would, but I appreciate it. Introspective for me. Big life thoughts. In my own way, I am a nomad. Oh, Matt. Oh my god. Some of my friends have followed him already. Oh my god, thank you guys. I promise I'm gonna try to get him back on my channel soon. I go back home again in May, so hopefully we can film together. Oh, speaking of, another movie that I watched with my dad, we watched The Purge. This was my second time watching the movie, and I remember really liking it the first time that I watched it, and this time around I think I liked it even more because I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Yes, I think it deserves it. Very simply stated in my review, I don't think I need to say anything else. The social commentary is very potent, the acting is good, and the concept is something that still blows my mind to this day. Yeah, dude, The Purge, those movies are so insane. I appreciate that the franchise tried to show us The Purge from different socioeconomic, different racial backgrounds as well. I just feel like as the franchise went on, the movies kept getting worse and worse. I am excited to watch the TV show because my friend Tiago from Royal Horror has said it's really good. So I am gonna check that out at some point. Maybe at some point I'll do a Purge series on my channel. Or maybe I'll just watch them all with my dad and then we can do a ranking video together. How's that sound? Anyways, I'm a fan of The Purge. I really like that first movie. Up next is a creature feature from 1990. It's based on a short film by Stephen King. It's called Graveyard Shift. John Hall is a drifter who wanders into a small town in Maine. He needs a job and decides to seek employment at the community's top business, a large textile mill. He is hired to work the graveyard shift, and along with a few others, he is charged with cleaning the basement. This task strikes the workers as simple enough, but then as they proceed deeper underground, they uncover an unspeakable monstrosity intent on devouring them all. I think I just have a soft spot for creature features because this movie was objectively pretty terrible, but I still gave it 2 stars. There's a lot that's wrong with the movie, namely a lot of the acting and the writing is pretty atrocious, and this is also one of those movies that it's really bad but it's entertaining, so I don't really recommend it as a film, but I do recommend it if you want to watch it with friends and play a drinking game. I think that would be super fun, and the only reason honestly why I didn't give it more stars for entertainment value is because a lot of the movie people were like abusing rats, like spraying them or like dropping them into giant meat grinders and stuff like that, and that just made me really uncomfortable because rats are misunderstood creatures. They're actually very friendly and very sweet and very clean. I can't really handle animal abuse in general, and of course they weren't really abusing these rats. Like you can kind of tell based on their practical effects how they kind of got around actually harming any of the animals, but nonetheless it made me uncomfortable because honestly I think that a lot of the practical effects of this movie really hold up. I think the effects are pretty fun, but like as a movie it's not very good. But it's on Hulu right now. I think they're taking it off pretty soon, so hop on that if you haven't seen it. Up next, I watched several more movies with my dad when I went home, so this next one that we watched is It Comes at Night. Secure within a desolate home as an unnatural threat terrorizes the world, a man has established a tenuous domestic order with his wife and son, but this will soon be put to the test when a desperate young family arrives seeking refuge. Okay, It Comes at Night was extremely intense. I gave it 3.5 stars out of 5 because it is an exceptionally well-made film, but the movie is really not for me. It's an A24 movie, so it's definitely a lot more drama than horror, so it's not going to be for everybody. But also, I think the reason why it was so kind of exceptional and so effective for me is because it centers around an extremely deadly virus, and that just hits so much closer to home now given that we're literally in a panoramic. And I love the message of the movie because I like that while the virus is the most imminent and obvious threat, another threat is kind of our paranoia with one another, kind of our inability to trust, our inability to work well with other human beings. It definitely makes some points. This movie makes some really good points, and it's very depressing, but I think it's very well made, as I said. I don't necessarily recommend the movie because I think you have to have a very particular taste to enjoy it in any capacity, but it's something very fresh and different, and if you need something new to watch, I recommend trying it out. Although my dad rated this movie, he only gave it 2 stars, and he said, I would not recommend it to anyone, negative and sad. Simple. Well done, I would say. A24 movie. Oh, Matt. So there's Matt's thoughts on It Comes at Night as well. Hi, I just realized while editing that I completely forgot to talk about Gothica. That was another movie that I watched. I watched it the same night as It Comes at Night, I think, because I watched that with my dad as well. I don't know why I just skipped over that when I was filming, whatever. I gave Gothica 3.5 stars out of 5. If you're not familiar with it, after a car crash, a criminal psychologist regains consciousness only to find that she is a patient in the same mental institution that currently employs her. This was a movie that I don't think I can rewatch because it preyed on probably my most primal fears. To be a sane person and be committed into an institution and have everyone around you convincing you that you're crazy and you like losing your grip on sanity, that's one of my worst fears. There's also so much intense editing in this movie, and it's not really in the same kind of flashy way as other movies that came out around the same time because this is a 2003 movie, but it's very intense because what you're watching is like what this character is feeling. So you're feeling everything from her perception. So for example, when she starts to hear voices, the camera will like go and like swivel around her head, and it seems like it goes through her hair, and you hear these voices. And so in a way, you almost are the voices because the camera kind of follows around these voices that she's hearing. It's very, very weird and very uncomfortable. And that movie had me just really uncomfortable and very freaked out. It's insanely dark. Like, the movie goes to very, very dark places that I am not okay with. Like, I was not comfortable with it. But I feel like someday I'm gonna want to rewatch the movie because I think that the story was genuinely pretty freaking good. Also, the acting performances, we have Penelope Cruz, we have Halle Berry, there were a couple other really big actors in it, but I can't remember their names. I think it's worth seeing, but if you're a sensitive person, I don't know if I can really recommend this movie because I wouldn't really want anyone to recommend the movie to me, you know what I mean? Although I'm glad I watched it, but at the same time, like, it was just a lot. The movie was a lot. And that's all I'm gonna say. Back to the video. Up next, I also decided to show my dad the Blair Witch Project, which I gave 4.5 stars. I think the first time I rated it on Letterboxd, I only gave it 4 stars, but I decided to show it to my dad because he doesn't like found footage, but I was like, Dad, this movie, it had a historical impact. It's a very important movie in that it kind of made the found footage subgenre explode. It inspired so much in the following years, and so I decided to show it to him even though he didn't really like it. I just think it's an amazing movie. I feel the opposite to a lot of people, where a lot of people say that it was effective for them the first time that they watched it, but then as they rewatch it, it gets a lot more boring. I'm the opposite. I find myself appreciating the movie more and more every time I rewatch it, and it's becoming kind of a comfort movie for me. And the reason why I see both sides of the coin of is it scary, is it not scary, is because for me personally, I have a very hyperactive imagination, and so when I can't see things, it makes me feel a lot more tense than when I can. I think that's kind of just an anxious person thing because anxious people, like, we fear kind of the unknown, if you will. Anxious people tend to kind of try to compute every possible outcome to every scenario, and so when you don't have enough information presented to you on screen, it scares me more than if I can see exactly what's happening right in front of me. But for some people, it's the opposite. Like, if they don't see anything going on, they're just bored, like they can't actually see what the threat is. For me, I can just imagine it well enough on my own, you know, I don't need to see it. I think it's just such a profoundly well-made film, especially because it also exploits some of my worst fears, and it also does so in such a subtle and believable way. Getting lost in the woods, I would die. I would not survive that. I don't have that type of survival instinct, I don't think. And so I just love the progression of this movie because as they keep having to spend night after night after night in this forest, it just becomes more and more hopeless, to the point where I feel like that and them kind of losing their minds and whatnot is a little bit more scary than the concept of the witch. I think the witch and that part of the story is amazing and also very effective, but I think that the more crucial component of this story is the fact that there are young people that are lost in the woods. And maybe to that point, it could kind of be debatable, like, is all this stuff about the witch kind of happening in their minds? Like, are they just losing their minds because they're out in this forest? Which, you know, is not the case, but it's kind of just fun to ponder that. Oh. Oh my god. Anyways, I could talk about that movie a lot. I'm gonna move on. Oh my god. Hiccups. Oh my god. That was so violent. I'm sorry. Okay, moving on to the next movie, which is Fear.com. When 4 bodies are discovered among the industrial decay and urban grime of New York City, brash young detective Mike Riley teams with ambitious Department of Health researcher Terry Houston to uncover the cause behind their violent and inexplicable deaths. That was a run-on sentence. I got out of breath. The only common factor shared by the victims, each died exactly 48 hours after logging onto a website called Fear.com. So Fear.com, I gave this movie 1 star, and this was literally all I said in my review. And shout out to Keith, who said sometimes that's all that needs to be said. Yep, sometimes that's it. I feel like I should expand upon that now because I know that some people probably like the movie, so I should, like, justify why I hated it. It's not even that it's horribly made or anything. I think that actually kind of the stylization of the color palette with the cinematography is kind of nice. They used a lot of blue tones, and sometimes they'd have like little pops of orange or whatever to provide contrast. So stylistically, it's not horrible. The acting, however, another story. And actually, no. I take that back. The stylization was kind of horrible because they did have these moments, these little weird kind of montages where the editing was just so chaotic, and it's kind of like this early 2000s thing that they did a lot back then for some reason. It's comparable to like a lot of the Saw movies where you know how sometimes when they open on a person that's in a new trap, they do all these crazy whip pans and there's all these crazy like editing techniques and makes it really flashy. So there was a lot of that going on in this movie, and I don't like that. I don't like flashy editing because I'm like, you know what, just prove to me that there is substance in what you're showing me and you don't have to do all this busy stuff. And I felt like Fear.com kind of relied on that for some shock value, and it was not my cup of tea. And the story also is just kind of dumb. Like, it's one of those things that's kind of scary in concept, like an urban legend, like Slender Man and stuff, but it's just one of those things that even though it's scary in concept, it's just really not something that's going to be executed well in a movie. Like a website that makes you die based on your worst fears. It's just kind of dumb. But I can't blame them. It was 2002. The internet was much more scary back then, and you know, these kind of stories actually had merit. Although Rotten Tomatoes does agree. They do agree with me over there. Up next was a movie that I watched called Ratter. Emma is a young graduate student just starting a new life in New York City. Like most people her age, she is always connected. Her phone and laptop are constant companions documenting her most intimate moments. What she doesn't realize is that she's sharing her life with an uninvited and dangerous guest. A hacker is following Emma's every move. When the voyeuristic thrill of watching her digitally isn't enough, the situation escalates to a dangerous and terrifying level. So Ratter actually stars Ashley Benson, who you would recognize from Pretty Little Liars. And that synopsis that I read off, it just feels like such clickbait because truly so much nothing happens in this movie. It's found footage, so you know, they established that we are watching this girl from the perspective of her stalker, and it's honestly like they expected that to carry the entire movie and like keep up the tension and suspense throughout the entirety of the movie, but it just doesn't, because once you establish it, it's like, okay, it's kind of shocking and gross in the beginning, but then because it's found footage, like we've seen other found footage movies before, it's not like it's doing anything unique. So I kind of forgot that we're supposed to be viewing it from the lens of the stalker. I just felt like I was just watching this girl just live her life. And they do a horrible job of building the tension. Like I said, literally a whole lot of nothing happens in the movie. Like there's no substance. There's nothing to really cling on to for you to be like on the edge of your seat. You know what I mean? The ending of the movie is pretty messed up, and I think that, you know, the ending, it's a lot. I don't think they really took it as far as they could have gone, and kind of like as soon as it was starting to get exciting, the movie ends, so just not really a fan. Give it 1.5 stars, and I feel like that's fair. I think Ashley Benson actually had a really decent performance, but you know, that's kind of besides the point if there's no substance to the movie. So anyways, moving on. The next thing I watched was Dancing with the Birds. Some of the world's most exotic, majestic birds display delightfully captivating mating rituals, from flashy dancing to flaunting their colorful feathers. Dancing with the Birds. Okay, so I gave this movie 4 stars. It's 100% deserved. This movie is just hilarious. It was very fun, very bright, very colorful, and you get to learn about a lot of really crazy exotic birds. And you will be in disbelief at a lot of their mating rituals. You will be like, this can't be real. Are these just like little CGI made up birds? But no, there are some creatures on this planet that genuinely mate in the way that they do. It's hilarious. I highly recommend it. It's an excellent documentary. Up next, moving on though to a movie called Yummy, which came out in 2019. A young couple travels to a shabby Eastern European hospital for plastic surgery. The young woman wants a breast reduction. Her mother comes along for yet another facelift. Wandering through an abandoned ward, the boyfriend stumbles upon a young woman gagged and strapped to an operating table. He frees her but does not realize he just caused the outbreak of a deadly virus. So Yummy only received 2 stars from me because half the time I couldn't tell if I was watching a porno or a horror movie. They also try to psych you out by setting up a bunch of commentary about like what it is to be a woman, what it is to be large chested and have eyes on you all the time. And it starts off really strong. So like the first 20 minutes of the movie, you're like, oh, okay, so this movie might kind of be about this woman's journey with her body. Maybe we'll get some commentary about the male gaze and everything and like see how that gets fleshed out. And then nope. Anything that's interesting about this movie gets completely abandoned after about the first 20 minutes, and then it just becomes your typical run-of-the-mill zombie movie. It was really disappointing because the way that they set it up was very fascinating to me, and then it just became such a basic zombie movie. They even used the age-old trope of a guy hiding his zombie bite. It's such an unbelievably frustrating movie, but because it is a very basic run-of-the-mill zombie movie, it does have some good entertainment value. If you're in desperate need of a new movie to watch and you love zombie movies, then I would recommend this movie. Okay, so up next, I attempted to watch The Village, M. Night Shyamalan's The Village. If you're unfamiliar, when a willful young man tries to venture beyond his sequestered Pennsylvania hamlet, his actions set off a chain of chilling incidents that will alter the the community forever. I only gave it 1.5 stars. It's just gonna be a no from me. On my horror Instagram the other night, I had you guys vote on like what I should watch, and Dead Silence and The Village actually tied, so I decided to watch The Village. But also that night, I had taken an edible and I was just like not in the right frame of mind to be watching that movie. So obviously for the headspace that I was in, the movie was just extra weird and extra not making any type of sense at all to me. I could not figure out what was going on. Like I could not get a grip on this movie at all. So I decided to turn it off and watch Blair Witch instead. But I did finish it. I waited till the next day. I watched it sober and it still just is a no from me. The reason why I gave it any stars at all, I literally only gave it 1.5, is because of the acting performances. There are some really talented actors in this movie and their performances stood out to me, which is why I think this movie deserves some credit. And also the production design, like it is fairly transportive. It's definitely not in the same league whatsoever as The Witch, which I feel like The Witch is almost like a more polished version of The Village. But anyways, everything else about the movie just felt really ridiculous to me. The plot kept meandering and like not really staying on track. There are so many scenes in the movie where I'm like, okay, but why are we here now? And I also even laughed out loud at parts of the movie that I'm pretty sure were supposed to be very terrifying because it felt very unironic. It felt like they were trying to be frightening with what they were doing on screen, but it came off very corny to me. It just didn't work. It didn't work. I was laughing. I was like, oh my god, no way. And it's just not for me. So I guess I fall into popular opinion with that one because most people don't like that movie, right? But anyways, like I said, the first time I was watching it, I decided I just couldn't handle it. That edible was just hitting and it was making me feel all types of weird. So I decided to put on something a little bit more comforting and I threw on Blair Witch, right? Very comforting movie. So this is the Blair Witch Project sequel that came out in 2016. I actually gave it 3.5 stars and I enjoy rewatching it every time. I think it's actually a really good movie. But the reason why it only gets 3.5 stars, like it's just a little bit above average, is because the movie does get a lot wrong. There's a lot about the movie that is kind of ridiculous, namely the jump scares, which is just something that I feel like the original didn't really have. The original was able to kind of rely on its ability to create tension and suspense, whereas with Blair Witch, they went the route of being a lot more in your face. But this could be seen as a good thing for people that found the original to be boring, because in this sequel, you do see a lot more. Like there's a lot more going on screen. And I'm not a fan of body horror because it does too much to me, but I'm actually a fan of it in Blair Witch. The reason why I am is because there was body horror used in such a way that it kind of added to the tension of being trapped in the woods. And that was something that they didn't use to their advantage in the original Blair Witch Project, and I thought it was such a good idea. I feel like they took the original concept and they really built on it. And this is a movie that I highly recommend. I really, really like it as a sequel and as a standalone film. But wow, I watched a lot of movies in March. I watched 22 movies in the month of March. That's pretty good. And that's not even including all the Saw movies that I watched and Final Destination and Harry Potter, because those are movies that I cover in my series, so I don't rate them on Letterboxd. But yeah, wow. That was a lot. That was a lot to talk about. I was also gonna film my review of Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince today, but now my throat kind of hurts. Anyways, that's gonna do it for me today. Definitely let me know down below what movies you'd like me to watch and talk about in my next wrap-up. And also please follow my horror Instagram account. I've been interacting with you guys there, posting my stacks. I've kind of figured out my aesthetic and I really like it. And of course over there as well, you also get to vote on what I watch. I think the next movie I'm gonna watch is Dead Silence because it did tie with The Village. But if you'd like even more content from me on my Patreon, I've been doing this really fun series of stoned Would You Rather videos. Those are a lot of fun and my patrons have really been enjoying those. I also have a vlog channel and I do a lot of miscellaneous stuff over there, so just check it out. I'm sure there's something you'd enjoy. But all of that, as well as all my social media, will be linked down below. I hope that you enjoyed this video and I hope I catch you in the next one. Bye!